If you are running HDZero and ExpressLRS, there's a pretty cool feature you may not be using. Check this out. So this HDZero quad is on R1 right now for channel and band. But maybe I have some friends flying with me and I want to get off of R1 because that's too close and we're going to interfere. I think I want to set my quad to R8, but I don't want to mess with stick commands or having to get out Betaflight and set it in the video transmitter tab or anything crazy like that. And I really don't want to have to fiddle with my VRX to set the channel. That's a pain. Let me just press a button on my radio. And just like that, my drone is now on race 8. Pretty cool, right? Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today, as you saw, we're going to be covering the HDZero and ExpressLRS backpack functionality. This is a functionality that HDZero and ExpressLRS went in to create together, which allows you to use a Lewis script on your radio to send commands to both your quad and your VRX to change channel and frequency. You can also change the power on your quad, and you can start and stop your DVR recordings with a switch and a custom delay, which is pretty handy if you want to start and stop your recordings with your arm switch and not worry about missing any extras as you get to the ground. It comes in really handy with the ambient audio mic on the new HDZero VRX, because after you land, you can have it continue to record for 5 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever you want to set it to, and it will continue to record audio and your drone's video feed even after you have disarmed and landed. Pretty cool, right? Well, let's talk about how we get there. And first, we're going to talk about the ExpressLRS project. If you haven't heard of ExpressLRS, it is a low latency, long range, open source control link project. And it's kind of taken the market by storm. Compared to other control links of its quality and distance, it's dirt cheap. Most of the transmitters for ExpressLRS you can pick up less than $100. And most of the receivers cost about $15, which is way cheaper than other options on the market. It also gives you incredibly long range, even at lower milliwatt outputs, and exceptionally fast responses, up to 500 Hertz. It is a great little project. Well, they have worked to create a backpack function that cooperates with the HDZero line of VRXs. This is compatible with the SharkBite VRX and the new HDZero VRX. For today's example, we will be using the HDZero VRX, and we'll cover that here in a minute in the hardware requirements to get this done. So, having said that, let's get into the things you're going to actually need to be able to accomplish this. First and foremost, you're going to need to be comfortable with flashing your HDZero equipment as well as your ExpressLRS equipment. If you're not currently running ExpressLRS or you really don't have any idea how to flash it, I'm going to link a video down below in the description with Joshua Bardwell's definitive guide to ExpressLRS. It is a very good resource for everything ExpressLRS, including how to flash it and a lot of information about the hardware itself. So you will need to be comfortable with getting the correct version of ExpressLRS running on your module, as well as updating to the most current version for the VRX and the VTX from HDZero. Alongside that, you'll need to make sure your hardware meets the specifications. Most of the newer ExpressLRS transmission modules come with the backpack chip built in. And essentially what the backpack chip is an extra EP series Wi-Fi chip that allows it to communicate with the EP series Wi-Fi chips on the receivers to make a little backpack functionality that essentially is an ad hoc Wi-Fi network where it can send the commands and then be translated out of a UART to the equipment, like what's happening here on this VRX. So there is a compatibility list of modules that include the backpack function. Like I said, most of the newer ones do, but I will also link that down in the description. For the receiving side, there is also a compatibility list for receivers that will work for the backpack function. Most of those receivers are the EP series receivers from ExpressLRS and their various manufacturers. Since it is an open source project, They don't create the hardware. A lot of other manufacturers do, and there is a list of compatibility for that, which will be linked below as well. So like I said, you will need to know how to flash both the ExpressLRS hardware and the HDZero hardware, have a compatible TX module with a backpack, and have a compatible receiver you're ready to turn into the backpack on your VRX. As far as the software itself goes, you will want to make sure that you're running at minimum version 2.3 of ExpressLRS. As of this video, they are on version 2.5. I recommend you just go ahead and flash all the way up to 2.5 before you start this process with the backpack. We will be creating firmware for the backpack in the TX and the RX in this demonstration, but it is a good idea to go ahead and make sure your actual ExpressLRS firmware on your module is already running the most current version to avoid any conflicts. It will also be a good idea to make sure you're running the most current version on your HDZero VRX or your SharkBite VRX, as well as the VTX in your quad. Now, speaking of VTXs, this function does require that you use smart audio on the drone. For this demonstration, I'll be using the Freestyle VTX, which does have smart audio enabled with my quads. You will not be able to do this with the Whoop board as it does not have smart audio, and you won't be able to do this with any of the other boards for which you have not already hooked up smart audio. So if you're running the Race VTX, or you happen to get the brand new, hopefully going to ship at the end of the month, Whoop Lite board, which does support smart audio, or you're running the Freestyle VTX from HDZero, those all support smart audio. Make sure you have it hooked up and going and all configured. If you don't know how to do that, I don't know a video offhand, but do some Googling and I bet you could find it to get that going on your quad. Once you have all those things covered, it's time to start. And we're gonna start by looking at why I picked some specific hardware for the VRX to make the backpack module work, and why I'm gonna be doing it with the HDZero VRX itself. Now let's start with the reason why I'm gonna be doing this on the HDZero VRX. Because of this port down here at the bottom. You see this port right here between the firmware update port and the HDMI port. This port right here is specifically made to run the backpack functionality in this VRX. It even comes with this little cable in the box, and it's really easy to solder up to your backpack receiver up top. Now for the backpack receiver, I'm going with the brand new Happymodel EP82, which is an ELRS receiver made specifically for the backpack function. You can do this with other EP series receivers in the compatibility list, but I recommend just picking up one of these and using it as your backpack receiver. It's so far the only one made specifically for the job. It costs $4 instead of the $15 most of the other receivers cost. It has a built-in Wi-Fi antenna on the back, so you don't have to worry about a protruding antenna from a UFL or one of those little ceramic antennas sticking up. And it has a physical button on the front so that we can get it into Wi-Fi flashing mode without having to go through any real trouble. It is also very light, very small, and pretty easy to wire up to this VRX. Speaking of that wiring, the way you will want to wire this, and you will want to go ahead and solder this up before we start doing all the flashing, is starting from the left and working our way right with the button facing us, yellow, green, red, black. The yellow and green wires are the RX and TX that go into the UART of the VRX. The red and black are obviously power, but the order, if you are looking at the button, is yellow, green, red, black. And that will be reflected in the pads down here when we'll say RX, TX, power, and ground. So go ahead and get that wired up. You can stick it wherever you want on the VRX. I chose right here because I want access to the button and to be able to show you guys easier, but you do what you want with it. It really doesn't matter where you stick it. And go ahead and plug it in down in the bottom. And let's move on to getting all of the software ready to get these modules going. And to build the firmware, we're gonna head over to the computer and we're gonna use ExpressLRS Configurator. Now, like I said earlier, you're gonna wanna be familiar with how ExpressLRS Configurator works and building firmware for your TX module, because this will be very similar to that. You're also going to want to be familiar with how to Wi-Fi flash this firmware once we get done building it. And we will be building backpack firmware for both the TX and the RX. The backpack firmware is different than the ELRS firmware you're already running on your transmitter. It is a whole separate subsystem inside of there. So we will be flashing both of them, and I will show you how to do that specifically and how it is slightly different than what you are used to or should be used to doing with your TX. So let's head over to ExpressLRS Configurator on the computer, and let's build the firmware for the receiving module that goes on the VRX. In ExpressLRS Configurator, the first thing we're going to want to do is go to the Backpack tab over here on the left. Like I said, this isn't the same firmware that runs on the TX itself. This is a separate firmware system, so this is specifically for the backpack functionality. And we're going to start with making the firmware for the receiving end of this backpack connection. So you can see at the top that we are on version 1.1 as of this video. I recommend you just flash to that version. We're going to go down here to the target and pick device category. And for that, we're going to go with VRX. Now, it doesn't say RX, it says VRX. You'll see why. And then we're going to go to device. Now, I did mention we are using the Happymodel EP82 VRX backpack, but that is not what we're going to select here. Instead, we're going to select the HDZero VRX 5.1 VRX backpack, because this will contain all of the functionality we need for our HDZero integration. For flashing method, I'm going to pick Wi-Fi because I always flash over Wi-Fi. You can leave standard mode. I do recommend that we go ahead and put a binding phrase in here. You can see mine. If you happen to be out in the field with me and you want to bind to me, go for it. But this is a binding phrase. It will make it far easier if we flash the firmware with the binding phrase for both the TX and the RX of the backpack. It's also a good idea to go ahead and put your home Wi-Fi in here so that next time you want to update this firmware, when they move off of 1.1, you can do it right inside of the configurator and it will connect directly to your home network. It makes it super duper simple. And yes, my Wi-Fi it hurts when I pee. Yeah, I get it. It's funny. Anyway, so now that we have selected the proper things, version 1.1, the VRX for device category, and the HDZero VRX 5.1 VRX backpack for device, we're going to go ahead and hit build down here. And now that our firmware is built, we're actually going to take this file and let me talk to you about where that file belongs. And the reason why I want to talk to you about it is because at this point you have a decision to make. We are going with Wi-Fi flashing. So if you have a computer that's capable of connecting to a Wi-Fi network, you have a desktop with built-in Wi-Fi, or you're running it on a laptop. In my case, I am using a desktop with built-in Wi-Fi, so I'm going to be saving it to my desktop itself. If you don't, then you may want to do this with your phone. And the easiest way to do this with your phone is to use something like OneDrive or Apple Cloud or Google Drive. You drop it in there on your computer and it will deliver it to your phone essentially. Then you go to your phone and you download it off of that Drive app to your phone's local storage. And we can use your phone to connect to the Wi-Fi on these TX and RX boards to do the flashing in the next step. But at this point, you do need to decide if you will be able to connect to Wi-Fi and do the flashing with your computer, or if you need to move this bin file over to your phone so that you can use the Wi-Fi on your phone to connect and do the flashing there. So now that we have the RX firmware built, let's go build the TX firmware. So back to ELRS configurator. And since we just got finished building the RX firmware, we're just going to hit the back button here and go back to the build screen. We're still in the backpack section. We are still going to be using version 1.1 for this. The first thing we're going to do is change the target. So we've already built the VRX or the RX firmware. Now we're going to build the TX firmware. For this, it's all going to depend on the model of ExpressLRS transmitter you are using. In my case, I'm going to be using the Happymodel TX backpack, as I am using the Happymodel 2.4 Pro TX in my radio, but pick whatever model works with your hardware. I'm going to go ahead and select the Happymodel because that is mine. Again, we'll be doing a Wi-Fi flash for this. Standard mode is perfect, and it's the exact same settings. Go ahead and make it the same binding phrase as what you used on the RX. It actually should already be here from when you did that, as well as your network for your home Wi-Fi. If you entered it on the RX, it should be here for the TX as well. So once we have all that, we're just going to go ahead and hit build again. And there is our bin file for the TX. So we do the same thing with this bin file that we just made a decision about with the RX bin. And now we have firmware for both the RX and the TX of the ELRS backpack. We're going to start by flashing the TX, which is the one on your HDZero VRX. In our case, again, it is the Happymodel EP82 backpack receiver. We're going to start by Wi-Fi flashing this thing. So, like I said a minute ago, it is important where you decided to do this from. If you have the firmware on your PC and you're able to connect to Wi-Fi from your PC, we'll be flashing with your PC. If you have it on your phone via one of the cloud apps that I mentioned, then we will be connecting to the Wi-Fi to do this on your phone. Either way, the instructions are basically the same. It's just going to look a little bit different because a phone screen is different than a computer screen. But I will be doing this on the computer. So for reference, all of these instructions will be done on a computer. It may look slightly different for you, but the steps will be the same. In order to get started, we're going to put our Happymodel EP82 or whatever receiver you happen to have for ExpressLRS. For the purposes of this demonstration, it will be the EP82 because it is what I think is the simplest, into Wi-Fi flashing mode, and let's get started. And to get the EP82 into Wi-Fi flashing mode, we'll obviously need it connected to your VRX, and we're going to need access to the physical button here. But we're also going to need your power cable and a battery to run it on. This is my goggle battery, so I'm just going to set it off to the side. And we're going to go ahead and power this VRX up, and then we're going to get a solid blue light, and we're going to go ahead and press the physical button on it. Now here in a second, that blue light will start to blink rapidly. That's what we want to see. That means it's in Wi-Fi mode. Now we're going to go over to our device and find it. And whether you're on your computer or your phone, you're going to want to pull up your Wi-Fi network browser, and what you're going to be looking for is ExpressLRS RX Backpack or Backpack RX. It'll be an SSID that looks something like that, and the password is going to be ExpressLRS, all lowercase. And then we're going to move on to the computer. Let's go to a web browser and let's flash this thing. So the first step of flashing this backpack module will be to go to http://10.0.0.1/ force equals true. It is important for the force equals true on these modules because we'll be forcing firmware onto them. It is in the ELRS wiki on how to do this, so I recommend that you do it as well. Once this page loads, you'll want to use the Choose File button to find the HDZero RX 5.1 backpack firmware that we built earlier. Hit Open and then click Update. It will flash your EP82, and then after it gets done flashing, it will reboot. You will get a solid blue light, and you can disconnect the power from your VRX. And now that you have the Backpack RX all flashed, it is time to flash the Backpack TX. Like I said, this is a little bit different than the firmware for your ELRS TX itself. It's a whole separate chip in there, so we built separate firmware for it, and there is a specific way to get it into Wi-Fi mode. So let's go over to the bench with our radio, and I will show you how to get that into Wi-Fi mode. And to get your TX backpack into Wi-Fi mode, you're going to want to go to the ExpressLRS Lua script, go down to Wi-Fi connectivity, and you're going to want to enable backpack Wi-Fi. Just click that, it'll run for a second, and the Wi-Fi will come up for you. And again, once that is running, you're going to want to go to whatever device you're going to flash with Wi-Fi, so your computer or your phone, pull up the SSID browser again, and this time you're going to be looking for ExpressLRS TX backpack or Backpack TX, one of those variations in the SSIDs. The password is going to be the same. It's going to be ExpressLRS, all lowercase. And then we're going to go back to the computer or your phone again to a web browser and get this thing flashed up. And in the web browser, you're going to want to again go to http://10.0.0.1, and now we should see the TX module firmware update page for our TX backpack. BaconNinja from the future here, and I want to help you avoid a mistake that I made. If you'll notice when I'm showing you how to flash the Backpack TX, I am in the TX firmware tab of the screen. So if you see TX firmware like this, make sure to click over to where it says Backpack before moving forward. Sometimes when it loads, it doesn't auto switch to the Backpack tab, so make sure that you do that and don't flash over your TX by accident with Backpack firmware. And this has been a warning. Do not do that. My cat, Aria, agrees. Let's continue. Again, we will choose File, and we will find the firmware that we built. In this case for me, it is a Happymodel TX backpack. We do not want to flash this with the HDZero backpack firmware. We want to do it with the TX backpack firmware. So we're going to pick that one, hit open, hit update, and then let it run, and our radio will let us know after it has rebooted and completed. And that's it for the flashing. You have everything flashed. You have your RX and your TX flashed. So now we need to validate that they're going to connect. And hopefully, like I recommended, you used a binding phrase when you built the firmware. Using a binding phrase will allow these two to connect seamlessly without you having to press any bind buttons. I highly recommend that as your preferred method to bind with ExpressLRS, including the backpack. And we did for ours, so I'm going to assume you did as well. And to go test that everything is bound up and connected like it should be, we're going to take our VRX and our radio to the bench, and I'll show you what the lights should look like. The first step of validation is to make sure you have your radio on. We want the transmitter on before we start up the receiver. So we want to make sure our radio is on and the module is all lit up, all that good stuff before we start. And then we're going to take our VRX with the EP82 on top, and we're just going to power it up. And what we should see, if we've done everything right, is a solid light for a few seconds. That solid light right there for a few seconds, and then it should blink slowly a couple of times. There we go, it's blinking slowly. And then it should go solid again. If that thing goes solid again, that means you have a good link and you are good to go. You have validated your backpack setup. Now that everything is validated, let me go ahead and show you how everything works in the Lua script. So I'll show you how to change your band and channel and power, all those things in the Lua script, as well as set up the ability to put the DVR with the switch and the delays. Well, let's head over to the bench. I'll show you my radio and take a look at it. Let's start with changing the band and channel. We're going to go into our ELRS Lua script here, and we're going to go down to VTX Administrator. Inside of VTX Administrator, we have some settings, the first of which gives us the option for band, which I normally run race band. The next is the channel, so you have 1 through 8. You can set it to whatever you'd like. Then you have, I'm going to put it back to 1 because I run race 1. Then you have the power. You'll notice that's a dash. If you click this, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that kind of thing. It doesn't tell you the actual power outputs. It relates to the number in smart audio. So for me, 1 is 25 milliwatts, 2 is 200, 3 is 500, 4 is 1 watt, and 5 is 0 for my race VTX. We're just going to leave that at the dash because I like to use low power disarm, so I don't really mess with that. The next is the ability to set it to pit mode, so you can do that from here if you'd like. When you get all that set up the way you want it, you just hit send VTX. It will send that command to the VTX and do all your channel switching for you. Pretty cool, right? If you want to use the ability to start and stop recording and do all the delay things, you go back, go down to backpack here, and we can set it up. So you get to pick the channel you want to set it up on. AUX1 obviously is the default arming for ELRS, so if you want it to arm, when it arms, you want it to start recording, you can just leave it at AUX1. You'll also notice there's inverse, so the little exclamation, that would mean that when the switch is off. But you get all the channels, all the aux channels here, pick whichever one you'd like. I think a lot of people are going to go with AUX1 so that it starts when it arms. Then you also get to pick the start delay. The DVR can start 5 seconds, 15, 30, increments of 15 up past 5 seconds after you click whatever switch you've decided on. It can also stop recording after a certain amount of delay, whichever you would like. It's kind of nice if you want to come in and disarm and have it automatically stop the recording, but record a few more seconds for the audio from the VRX. It kind of works out nice. And then once you're done setting all that stuff up, you don't have to press anything other than just back, and you are good to go. And that's all there is to it. And I hope this has been really helpful, and if it has, please give me a thumbs up so that more people can find this video and hopefully start using this feature. A lot of people are using ExpressLRS, and more people are getting into HDZero, and this is a really helpful feature that only costs $4 to implement. So if you have it, you should probably use it. I think it's terrific. So please give us a thumbs up so those people can find it. If you haven't yet, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. But anyway, now you are ready to go. So you've got your backpack functionality all set up. Go have fun. Next time you want to flash this, hopefully you have entered your home Wi-Fi credentials and you won't have to go through the process of setting your EP82 into Wi-Fi flashing mode or turning the Wi-Fi flashing on your radio. Now, next time you do go to do this, regardless of what you did, if you didn't put your home Wi-Fi in there because maybe you don't want to, or you don't have one, or you're gonna flash in the field from your phone, that's okay. Next time you go to flash this, you can actually just go back into the ExpressLRS Lua script, go down to Wi-Fi and turn on the VRX Wi-Fi and turn on your backpack Wi-Fi right from the Lua script. So no button pressing or anything crazy like that. But it would be a good idea to keep the firmware up to date, because if I know anything about ExpressLRS and HDZero, they will be adding features to this all the time. Anyway, I hope this has been a feature you plan on using and that you will enjoy. I hope that it is easy enough for you to figure out. Please leave me some comments about your experience with the backpack function. If you're using it on ExpressLRS and HDZero, you can also utilize it on ExpressLRS and some analog modules. If you're already doing that, I'd really like to know how that goes. I'm kind of thinking about doing it to my SkyZone module because I like it so much with the HDZero stuff, and I still do run analog on occasion. Anyway, thanks for hanging in there with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get some use out of it. And until next time, I'll catch you later.